Has anyone had any experiences with seeing a man in a top hat and a trench coat? When I was 13 or 14 years old, I was sitting at the kitchen table with my little sister one morning. We were sitting across from each other with her facing me, and I'm facing the doorway to the laundry room. I look up and saw the shadow of a man wearing a black top hat and a black trench coat. I have always called him Abraham Lincoln because I guessed the clothes he had on. He took a step up, turned his head to the side, and then he disappeared. I had the typical face you make when people ask you if you saw a ghost. Then I put my face in my hands in disbelief. My little sister, only being 4, just asked if I had a headache, and not to scare her, I said yes. Later on, I told my mom about it, and she tells me that he has always been around her, but didn't explain any further. I just left it as that, but I always talk about this experience along with others I've had in my life. The other day, my daughter and her boyfriend came to visit, and we got to talking about paranormal experiences, and I told him the story. Her boyfriend tells me his mom saw him too, and he said he heard that was the devil. I kind of panicked inside, but then I looked it up and learned that this ghost is common. I had no idea all these years. I just thought it was something connected to just my family. Does anyone have any further information or have had experiences they can share? I encountered one hanging out in the old drive-in theater behind my apartment complex on several occasions. I guess they are called the Hat Men. Me and my friends used to see it off in the distance when we would sneak out there to hang out, but one night, I was inside and I saw him just over the fence looking in my window. I've never closed a window that fast ever. I don't think they harm people, but who knows? Yes. When I was about 8, I was staying at my friend's house. It was around 7 p.m. and the sun was just starting to go down, and we had decided to go for a bike ride around the neighborhood. The twins I was friends with lived 2 blocks away from a bank. We rode our bikes to the bank and stopped and rode around the parking lot for a minute before riding back home. By the time we were riding back home, it was dusk and getting kind of hard to see. As we rode out of the parking lot and onto the sidewalk, I noticed a really tall man with a black top hat and trench coat, and he was all black. Couldn't see a face. It was terrifying. He was a few yards away standing on the property of the bank. We had all seen it because we all 3 screamed and rode our bikes as fast as possible back to their house. We have never talked about it since, and I'm 20 years old now. I have told this story to multiple people, but nobody has ever really understood or believed me. For myself, this only happened once. When I was around 16 or so, I caught sight of what appeared to be a tall man in a coat and hat standing in the middle of the road outside my house. What is different was that it wasn't a top hat like others have described, but more similar to a fedora men wore in the 50s. I don't remember seeing any details, only a black silhouette. I wasn't able to get a good look at him, for he was gone in a blink of an eye. I remember standing and staring through the window at the front of my house trying to find out where he went. But he never showed up again. However, I would like to note that during the same week while I was at school, I saw a flash of fabric, like an end of a skirt, in the corner of my eye. It was a mainly red skirt with blue flowers and black outlines. But when I looked back to see who it was, no one around were wearing similar patterns or colors. I've never had another occurrence happen again that I recall, and I'm almost thankful for it. This was when I was young, around 6 to 8 years old. My whole family and I always seemed to have this same thing happen to them also. It was nighttime and pitch black room, but you could see some light in the hallway, and just standing in my doorway, I would see him. He would always be a shadow man with a top hat. Used to have very bad dreams too, and when I woke up, I could feel someone walking past my bed. As a kid, it was very traumatizing. Edit. To add further information, he left when I was around 10 when my parents got divorced. I assumed that he followed my dad when he left. I never saw the shadow man ever since. Yes. I saw him about 5 years ago when my BF and I went on a road trip to a city about 2 hours away. On our way back home, my BF was driving and began to turn right onto the main road. As he is merging, a man in a top hat and trench coat steps onto the road, and I thought my BF was going to hit him at high speeds. I gasped as I was expecting a bump from the body, but instead, my BF is startled and asks me what's wrong. There was no bump. I was confused, so I look behind me on the road, and I see him laying on the ground with his head detached. He was looking right at me with a large smile on his face. I didn't know other people have seen him too. It's strangely comforting to know other people have had similar experiences. Does anyone know who he is? Reading your post and then all of the comments gave me the chills. One of the few times I really felt like I encountered something was when I was probably around 10 years old. I went outside with my brother to let the dog out. It was pretty late at night. We used to have a broken hot tub covered with wood that had a privacy screen in a lattice pattern up the back of it. This memory is still so vivid all these years later, but I just remember looking up and through the lattice, seeing this perfect silhouette of a figure in a top hat and trench coat. I was having fun without a care in the world, and the second I saw this image, I was filled with dread. For weeks, my family made fun of me for being haunted by Abraham Lincoln. Never thought anything of this memory until reading posts like this. I was on Twitch a week ago on the just chatting part, and there was a girl who looked a bit gothic. She was drawing a picture of like an angel with demon wings. I commented saying nice drawing. She said thanks and told me she was also watching a horror film. For some reason, I asked her if she's ever experienced anything paranormal, then she started saying she's seen things from a very young age. She said she started off waking up to a child screaming on her chest, and there was also a lady in a white dress. This used to happen almost every night. She begged her mum if she could sleep in her room, and she eventually agreed. She slept on her mum's floor for a year and said that whatever she was seeing, she wasn't seeing anymore until her mum told her she needs to go back to sleeping in her room now. She said when she started sleeping back in her room, the child and woman had gone, but there was now a tall old man in a top hat that would sit in the corner of her room. She said it was less freaky than what she saw previously, so she wasn't too bothered, but over the next couple months, he would slowly be getting closer to her, and the closer he got, the more of a bad feeling she had. Her brother trained as a priest and apparently threw a load of holy water around and did whatever they do when getting rid of bad spirits, and she didn't see him again, but felt as though it wasn't the last she would see of him. She started seeing him again after she moved out of that house. The weird thing is, while she was telling me mid-conversation, she stood up, ran and turned the lights on, and told me she saw something behind her desk and heard growling, and that was her cue to stop talking about it. I'd never heard of the tall man before, but she told me that lots of people had also seen the same man. It's crazy too, to look on here and see all the other experiences of a man of the same description. She also said he had some sort of cane, very freaky. I have. Only it wasn't exactly a top hat and a trench coat. He was dressed more like a gangster in the 30s and had a scary smile. I only dreamed of him once when I was going through some stuff. It was terrifying, and after that dream, I started having panic attacks at bedtime and had a very strong feeling there was something living in my bathroom where I saw this hat man kind of leering at me. Eventually, I had an experience with a shadow in the middle of the night staring at me and then walking back to my bathroom. These were some very bad times for me, and I sought help at a spiritist center. Since then, I haven't seen it, dreamed of it, or had any paranormal experience, thank God. What really scared me back then was the fact that my grandpa, on his last days, suffering from Alzheimer, would be absolutely terrified of this hat man that would come to his house to collect money. Of course that wasn't real, but he would see this man and hide from him. I do believe this figure is related to debt. Not money-wise, but something spiritual and not restricted to this incarnation only. It usually shows up when you are psychologically weak or more open to the occult. It could also be attached to someone else close to you, like a family member, but be showing up to you because of the reasons above. It basically feeds on your energy and torments you. Hope to have helped. I wish I didn't know any of this. Wow. I just read all of the comments and I am amazed and comforted. I am 58 years old. The hair on my arms stood up when you mentioned the tall Abraham Lincoln man in a top hat. He appeared to me several times when I was 4 to 5 years old. He scared me to pieces. I would wake up and he would be standing at the foot of my bed staring at me. I remember it as if it were yesterday. I was so scared. I remember pulling the covers over my head and telling myself, it's just a dream, it's just a dream. When I pulled the covers down, he was still there. I remember throwing the covers over my head and asking him to go away. He spoke to me. I could hear him inside my head. Like he was talking telepathically. I couldn't see his face but knew it was there. His eyes weren't always visible, but they were red. The scariest time he came, it was the same thing. I would wake up to see him standing at the foot of my bed. I was in a twin-size bed and along each side of my bed stood 3 shadow figures. They weren't as tall as him and they weren't as defined. They were just dark rounded shadows. I always thought of them as his minions. He was at the foot of the bed and they were on the sides. Then he raised his arm and pointed a finger directly at me and said, "She's the one." I didn't see his lips move, but I heard him inside my head. Again, I threw the covers over my head and just cried, begging him to go away and leave me alone. I remember him asking me a question. I don't know what the question was, but I remember agreeing to it if he would just go away. He left then and took his gang with him. This traumatized me as a child, and I believe it shaped who I was. I was always afraid and shy when I was little. I have tried to figure out who or what this was and what he wanted from me, and why I was chosen. What did I agree to? I was once told that I agreed to take on the burdens of my family so the rest of them could succeed. Looking at their lives, I would agree that would be true. All of my siblings have been truly blessed in many ways where my life has been a struggle. I have done spiritual work to break whatever covenant I made as a child, and my life has improved immensely. Someday when I cross over, I will meet him and have a few words for him. Picking on little children is horrible. The house I grew up in was and still is haunted, but nothing ever scared me like the Hat Man did.